A lot of the time in the swordsmanship community, when the topic of conversation turns to double-bladed swords like this saber staff, you'll always get some wise butt who will comment something like, "Oh, it's no longer practical because you can't fight with it the way you would a normal sword." Well, there's a reason why we call this a saber staff then, isn't there? Because upon adding an offensive end to the backside of the weapon, you essentially turn it into a polearm like this custom billhook poleaxe hybrid. Weapons such as this had offensive measures on both the front and back side of the weapon, so that you could, from a guard position, offend with both the back and front side of the weapon, and with the right technique, you could use it to great effect without endangering yourself. Even when I choke up the weapon to a much shorter grip, there's still a lot I can do from this position. Now, of course, that same wisebutt will probably stick to his guns and be all, "Oh, well, at that point you clearly don't want a sword anymore, just use a polearm." No. That is the most trite, boring, unimaginative, and closed-minded argument you could possibly have. Number one, that kind of argument is the same as saying, "Oh, why melee weapon at all when you can just gun?" And number two, that kind of logic, if it were allowed to persist, we wouldn't have things like the greatsword, which is still clearly a sword that you need to fight with like a polearm because it's way too long to be fought with like a normal sword. But now, of course, that same wisebutt will probably shoot back saying, "Oh, well then why not just use a greatsword then, if you're so determined to have a sword that handles like a polearm?" That suggests that you're ignorantly implying that all polearms are fought with exactly the same, when you could not be further from the truth. Because you wouldn't fight with a spear the same way you would with a bardiche or a glaive guisarme, would you? And furthermore, the wisebutt may fire back one final time saying they didn't exist in history, so it doesn't count as a proper weapon. Well, if you're out to play the living history game, then that's fair enough. But just don't ruin the idea of double-bladed swords for other people who might want to explore how feasible they might be in a setting like, say, fantasy or alternate history. And at the end of the day, until somebody creates a functional double-bladed training sword that won't bend or break or anything else under pressure of combat, then we won't know how effective they will be.